another podcast of Springer International Handbooks of Education, Handbook of Using Virtual Exchange Across Disciplines, Building Global Citizens from Home, where we explore the ideas reshaping the way architects and designers learn, collaborate, and imagine the future of our built world. I'm Dr. Elena Dublu, and I will be moderating this session. I'm the Associate Dean of Architecture School at Metropolitan College in Greece. And today's episode dives into a truly compelling case of global hybrid architectural learning. We're exploring insights from the chapter, A Global Collaboration in Architectural Teaching, Integrating the Remote and the Real, which examines how students in Poland and Israel work together through virtual exchange to expand their architectural perception, creativity, and disciplinary understanding. I am joined by the chapter's authors, Professor Eva Stachura and Professor Amos Bar-A. I would very much like to introduce yourselves for the audience. Professor Stachura?
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
I'm a professor of architecture at Faculty of Architecture in Kraków University of Technology in Poland. Also running design courses, master and bachelor diplomas, and also running the scientific club, where students are experimenting with the innovations in teaching and learning architecture.
Thank you very much. And Professor Amos Bar-A?
Yes, good morning. I'm a senior lecturer at HIT, Holon Institute of Technology in Israel. I'm also an active architect and interior designer.
Great, thank you very much. Unlike traditional studio models, this collaboration between these two universities wasn't about replicating existing urban spaces. It was about disciplinary anticipation, framing, selecting, translating, and projecting possible futures. So your students use techniques like collage, superimposition, and narrative mapping, not just to represent space, but to think through it, to interrogate it and reimagine its atmospheres and its patterns. So what makes this project especially fascinating is how it bridges digital and physical modes of learning, and students remotely explored Jaffa and Tel Aviv while conducting embodied fieldwork in Krakow, discovering how remote and real experiences can reinforce, not just replace, one another. So today we'll unpack how virtual exchange becomes an engine of architectural learning, how it pushes students to compare, interpret, translate, and negotiate meaning across distance, how it shapes early design cognition, and how it prepares the next generation of architects for a world where practice is increasingly global, digital, and collaborative. So I would like to address the first question to Professor Stachura. Your chapter frames design not just the replication of reality, but as disciplinary anticipation. How did the hybrid Polish-Israeli collaboration, in your opinion, reveal new ways students can anticipate, frame, and project architectural futures?
What this project showed very clearly is that architectural design should not begin with simply reproducing reality. It should begin with learning how to anticipate possibilities. In Virtu Square, which was a fascinating adventure both for teachers and students were not just asked to document what already existed. They were encouraged to observe, compare, interpret, and design what a place could potentially become. The hybrid format was vital because it shifted students away from mere imitation toward genuine interpretation. An important part of the workshop logic was the deliberate pairing of places, sites. Elements identified in the Israeli sites, especially spatial dominance or key components of urban composition, could be reinterpreted in relation to Krakow squares selected for this workshop, either more directly as tools for improving spatial quality, or more freely as inspirations for atmosphere, character, use, or a more emotional tone. This relationship was intentionally left open so students could work across spatial, functional, and affective levels. The remote part opened a space for speculation and comparison. The on-site work in Krakow then tested those ideas against real experience, light, sound, textures, movement, and atmosphere. So, anticipation in this case was not abstract. It emerged from moving between remote observation and embodied experience, and from translating qualities across contexts. Students learned that the design process begins with framing a question, selecting what matters, and building a hypothesis, not by jumping too quickly to a finished form. For me, that is one of the key educational values of the project. It taught students that architecture begins not with replication, but with a disciplined ability to see potential and imagine possible futures for the sites. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an amazing explanation of the anticipation not being framed before the project began. So I would like to address the next question to Professor Barelli. Remote and embodied observation were intentionally choreographed in this project. What did your students learn from the tension between virtual exploration and on-site sensory experience?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, this tension between the virtual and embodied observation is actually in the core of this workshop. And they actually learned, the learning emerged from this gap between what the students expect, which is the virtual, it's expectation or imagination, and what they actually encounter on the physical side. There is a gap, and the learning emerges from that. The virtual mode enables a sort of abstraction. They can pause, they can zoom in, they can direct their colleagues to see pattern recognition, sort of conceptual thinking, maybe. On the other side, the embodied experience introduces, in that respect, a sort of resistance because the expectation is not fully what it is. Suddenly there are issues that the virtual does not transmit, like the light quality, more sensory, the materials, the atmosphere, all these disrupt the assumptions made in the virtual side. So there is a sort of what is emerging is a sort of mismatch between the virtual and the sensory, and what it forces the students is to make reinterpretation rather than confirmation. So the students actually, what they said about this is that they felt sort of a push and pull dynamic between the imagination, which is the remote, and the reality, the on-site, and this sort of escalation, or escalation strengthens the early stage design reasoning as hypothesis testing. They need to reconfirm constantly what their assumptions and what's happening actually on the site. So from our view, the tension actually strengthens the learning process.
Excellent. I would like to keep this reconfirmation of assumptions from the students. I find this an amazing part of the process of understanding space. And I would like to address the next question to Professor Stachura, and this relates very much to the tools that the students use, like collage, superimposition, and juxtaposition, that they were used as analytical, not just representational tools. Why are these techniques so powerful in early stage architectural reasoning, especially in hybrid learning environments?
Thank you for the question. It's actually a crucial question for this workshop. These techniques are so powerful because in the early design stage, students do not need polished answers. They need tools that help them think. Collage, superimposition, and juxtaposition allow students to work with fragments, with tensions, as Amos already mentioned, and with incomplete ideas. This is very important. And that is actually very important because early architectural reasoning is not about closure. It's about exploration. What I find particularly valuable is that these techniques keep the process open, yet they still demand discipline. A student must decide what to select, what to combine, what to compare, and why a certain relationship matters. So, this is not random image making, it is already a form of argument. In a hybrid learning environment, that becomes even more essential because students navigate between screenshots, video walks, field notes, atmosphere, memory, and discussion. These techniques help them integrate all the layers and explore possible meanings. In our chapter, collage, superimposition are not seen as presentation tools. They are thinking tools. They help students uncover hidden relationships, explore analogies between places, and consider multiple possibilities at the same time. And I think that is why they are pedagogically so valuable. They slow students down. They make them more selective. They help them move from passive image consumption to active visual reasoning. Instead of asking, how do I make this look good? Students start asking, what exactly am I trying to understand here? That is a very important shift in architectural education. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. Just explaining with very simple terms the value of exploration through various layers of information. Professor Barelli, you describe in your chapter an overabundance of images as a challenge in contemporary architectural culture. How did this collaboration help your students develop critical visual literacy and avoid superficial image consumption?
Yes, thank you. This is actually a beautiful issue, the challenge of overabundance of images in our culture. It's not a new idea. It was already mentioned by many scholars. We mentioned Marc Rouget, of course, regarding the non-places. He published already in the 80s. But we live in this overabundance and the consumption of images, and this challenge, as which actually intrigued me and Professor Satura very much when we constructed the workshop and when we wrote the chapter, of course. And the problem is not that there are too many images, but rather the passive consumption of them. And we wanted to help the students or teach the students to not be passive about it. And the Virtue Square made a shift from accumulation to selection and justification. Every image they selected had to argue something, and they understood it. And they learned to see they learn to see images as constructed and partial, which what they are, and not neutral. The method they constructed the images, collage and superimposition, etc., which Professor Shastura already mentioned, they turned the images into active tools of inquiry. They're not passive because they can be reconstructed. Images became in this way sites of manipulation, compression, and critique, not endpoints. So again, the whole idea is that they're not, the images are not passive, and the students are not passive about consuming them. This develops, in our eyes, developed for the students in intentional critical seeing instead of superficial visual browsing, which is critical in this age of abundance of images. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. I will definitely keep that final thought that images were not the endpoint, but points of interrogation. So that was amazing. I would like to address the next question to both of you, as it reflects the students' experience from both universities. They compare Krakow's public squares with remote sites in Jaffa and Tel Aviv. What did this cross-contextual comparison reveal about how cultural, climatic, and spatial differences influence architectural interpretation? Professor Stahura?
And maybe we start with Amos. Yes, because we've been discussing that before.
Well, we are risking that I will talk too much, but I will try to be brief about it. Yeah, you know, the cross-cultural is very interesting. It was widely discussed by Edward Said, the idea of the other, that when you observe the other or you're empathic towards the other, it makes you understand deeper your own context or the idea of the context. So the cross-context compression reveals that architecture is shaped by many things, by climate, culture, and social behavior, not just the forms. The students that they have to interact with another culture, they move from surface compression to relational thinking. They develop an understanding. The design decisions are often a response to the context and not just stylistic choices. So in that way, they develop context-sensitive architectural reasoning, which is very important in our field. Thank you.
If I may now add something, to build on Amos' point, I would stress that the comparison between Kraków and Jaffa or Tel Aviv was not meant as a simple side-by-side reading of different public spaces. As I mentioned earlier, an important part of the workshop logic was the deliberate pairing of places. This pairing created an open relationship between the sites, so that qualities identified in one could inform the reading or transformation of the other. What students discovered very quickly was that architecture is not shaped only by form. Actually, this discovery is the professor of architecture's dream. But also by climate, culture, as Amos already said, material conditions, and by specific aspects of social life, rhythms of use, informal behaviors of the users, density, and the everyday ways public space is inhabited. So the question was not simply what looks different. The real question was, what can be translated and on what level? In some cases, a dominant element or spatial principle could help improve the quality of a paired square in Krakow. In other cases, the transfer was looser, connected to atmosphere, character, or emotional tone. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. And I hope our listeners will listen to this discussion many times. As for me, it seems like it's developing into a manifesto of architectural education. It's very enlightening for me as well. Thank you. And it brings me to the next question. I would like to address this to Professor Vareli. The chapter highlights the notion of perceptual empathy. Could you please explain what this means and why it is essential for architectural learning in a digital and globalized world?
Yes, thank you. It's actually a very beautiful phrase, the perceptual empathy, and it's so important for not only architecture students, I think architecture professionals and researchers like ourselves. So it engaged both the students and us when doing the workshop and when writing about it. Perceptual empathy is defined as understanding space as a lived and experienced, not only what you see. It's actually the physical engagement of the body and the mind in the space. So it's how do we teach this? Because we usually explain architecture by just visual images, but it's actually, or even being in architecture, but lived experience is something else. So the workshop, although short, still began with seeing through the others' perspective, which were the remote students, but was not only the virtual thing, the technological thing, it was also that they had to see it through their colleagues' perspectives. So that enhanced this thing that the other, the perception of other people, of other minds. This extends to understanding cultural behaviors, atmosphere, everyday spatial practices conducted in the remote site. So it actually, I would say, force or enhances the movement from what it looks like to how it feels and functions for others, for the other. It's not only about myself as a designer, it's also how it feels and how it's experienced by a different person. It's essential, especially in a global and remote design context, where direct experience is sometimes limited. So you have to enhance your perceptual empathy. It builds, in my mind, it builds the capacity to question assumptions and also design responsibility, because you understand the responsibility of designing across contexts. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful way of describing this perceptual empathy, which makes a great lead to my next question that relates to intercultural dialogue. And I would like to address this to Professor Stachura. Intercultural dialogue wasn't treated in your project as an add-on, but as a direct contributor to disciplinary learning. How did this collaboration with peers abroad sharpen, in your opinion, students' ability to read context, to interpret atmospheres or question assumptions?
Thank you for the question. What I believe is particularly important in this project is that intercultural dialogue was not an afterthought added to the design process. It was a fundamental element that enabled disciplinary learning. Students were not merely exchanging impressions with their peers abroad. They were also learning how to observe, interpret, and justify space from another perspective. In our chapter, this becomes very clear. Israeli students acted as cultural and spatial interpreters, helping Polish students notice everyday practices, rhythms of use, atmospheric cues, and social meanings that might or otherwise have gone unnoticed. This had a very tangible impact on architectural thinking. It sharpened contextual analysis because students had to look beyond what was visually obvious. They had to ask why a place feels the way it does, how it is used, what behaviors it supports, and what may be culturally specific rather than universal. It also challenged assumptions. One of the most interesting things described in this chapter is that familiar places stopped being entirely familiar. Polish students started to reassess spaces that they believed they knew well, because questions raised by their Israeli peers made those spaces seem unfamiliar once more in a productive manner. This estrangement effect enhanced observation. And finally, collaboration deepened interpretive precision. When students co-produced collages, storyboards, and sequences, they had to negotiate meanings. They had to explain why a fragment mattered, why a certain atmosphere was significant, and why a particular transformation was justified. So intercultural dialogue did not sit next to architectural learning, it actively refined it. For me, that is the key point. Working with peers abroad made students more aware of context, more reflective, and more precise in their reading and interpretation of urban space. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm taking away this from this amazing discussion that familiar places stopped being that familiar, seeing through the lenses of this virtual exchange project that started questioning how well they know and reinterpreting them through the lenses of the students they were collaborating with. This is amazing. I'm going to address the next question to you as well, and I'm going to delve deeper into the virtual exchange project. And in your chapter, you suggest that fully virtual studios risk reducing creativity, while fully physical ones risk narrowness. What does this study teach us about the sweet spot between remote and physical modes of architectural education?
This question touches the essence of this workshop and of the chapter as well. For me, the sweet spot is not a simple balance between online and physical modes. It is a carefully designed relationship in which each mode does a different kind of pedagogical work. The remote mode is valuable because it creates distance. Students can pause, zoom, reframe, compare, and identify patterns that are sometimes difficult to grasp during a live site visit. In that sense, remote exploration supports abstraction. conceptual framing, and early hypothesis building. But the physical mode is equally essential because it reintroduces reality in all its complexity. When students are on site, they encounter sound, material, roughness, microclimate, movement, scale, atmosphere. And very often, these things disrupt what they thought they understood remotely. In the chapter, this discrepancy is treated not as a problem, but as a valuable trigger for refining early ideas. So the strength of the hybrid model lies exactly in that movement between the two. Remote exploration opens possibilities. Embodied experience tests, resists, and grounds them. This is why students describe the process as a kind of, as already Amos said, push and pull between possibility and constraint. And I think that is a very good description of early design thinking itself. The study also explains why the extremes are less effective. A wholly virtual studio may limit creativity by restricting spontaneity and sensory depth. A fully physical studio can become more limited if students remain confined with one context and do not develop a sense of comparative distance. Therefore, the sweet spot is not about technology, it is about pedagogy. It lies in structuring a loop between distance observation and embodied verification, so that students learn not only to see more, but also to turn perception into judgment and judgment into design reasoning. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I would like to address the next question to Professor Barelli regarding the other tools that you have used in your research, like narrative films and storyboards. How do time-based narrative representational tools reshape, in your opinion, the way students think about spatial change and lived experience?
Yes, thank you very much. This is also one more beautiful issue, the issue of time in architecture. The architecture and the experience of architecture happens through time. And this is not a simple idea to transmit. It's or engage with, and also to represent. How do you represent the passage of time through static representation? And the static representation sometimes points to static thinking. So our aim was to shift from static representation to temporal thinking, to somehow force the students to think in time way, sequences, transitions, cause and effect relationships. So the narrative films and the storyboards actually emphasize this experience over appearance. It makes the design process to unfold in their mind over time. It's not the fixed object, which is like I said, it's a complex thing to both think and represent. The narrative, the films and the storyboards actually enhance and force this idea of time. It also requires sort of a clearer articulation of the spatial logic and the user experience in spaces. It of course encouraged them, because the narrative and the storyboard is a sequenced representation. It's not static. So the student engaged with this kind of representation is being forced to his mind, his imagination, or hers imagination has to think how space is lived, not only it cannot stop in the moment, oh, it looks good. It has to be a lived, timed space. Yeah, thank you.
So I would like to address one final question to both of you as a closing remark. Looking toward the future of architectural education, in your opinion, what should institutions keep in mind when designing hybrid cross-border studios that genuinely strengthen disciplinary thinking rather than simply adding technology? Professor Bar-Eli?
Yes, thank you. This is, of course, one of the main aims to understand what we need, how should we deal with technology. And in my mind, technology, embracing only the new technology is not enough. Also, rejecting new technology is not a solution. And what should be done or understood is that the pedagogical structure is the key for this treating technology or thinking with or about technology. And we must, institutions must integrate or integrate both the remote and the physical, and not replace either. The remote through technology helps us to expand our perception, students' imagination, and context observation, while the physical grounds it and tests it and make it real, make it more tactical for them. And so yeah, I would say integration of both the technology and the remote and the physical. And it also helps compare cross contexts and to develop deeper reasoning for students. They understand context better. And I would say also one more issue would be the intercultural dialogue. It's a core to learning mechanism. It's not just something that you do. It needs to be deeply integrated into the curriculum in institutions. Yeah.
Thank you. And Professor Stahura?
I fully agree with Amos, and I would add that institutions need to consider the pedagogical structure of hybrid studios very carefully. Technology alone does not enhance disciplinary thinking. What matters is how remote and physical modes are interconnected, how comparison is integrated into the task, and how collaboration is organized. In our chapter, I would point 3 lessons. One key lesson is that hybrid studios work best when remote exploration and embodied experience are seen as complementary. The remote mode broadens perception and aids comparison. The physical mode grounds, tests, and sharpens interpretation. When these two aspects are carefully connected, students develop stronger contextual reading and more reflective design reasoning. A second point is that intercultural dialogue should not be treated as an extra layer. It should be part of the core discipline. Students learn more deeply when they have to explain, negotiate, and justify their interpretations with peers from different cultural backgrounds. And finally, these studios matter because they prepare students for the realities of contemporary practice, distributed collaboration, digital mediation, cultural difference, and increasing social and environmental complexity. So the goal is not to add technology, but to create a richer, more demanding learning environment. I would end with the statement that we need to strengthen students, future architects, as human-oriented creators of space in all aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this wonderful discussion today. That brings us to the end of today's episode. If anything, this global collaboration between your institutions offers a powerful reminder that architectural learning thrives when remote exploration and physical field work can be intentionally choreographed. They stretch the designer's perceptual range, making space for deeper interpretation and more nuanced design reasoning. And as the chapter shows, virtual exchange can be a catalyst for critical seeing, for creative adaptability, and for intercultural insight. Perhaps the most compelling takeaway is this, that hybrid pedagogy doesn't diminish the architectural studio, but it enriches it and teaches future architects to work across cultures, climates, and technologies. And above all, it empowers them to engage critically and responsibly with the complexities of the world they designed for. Thank you so much, Professor Stahura.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Amos Bar-Eli. And thank you to our listeners. Please stay tuned for more stories of innovation in virtual exchange and architectural education. Keep looking closely, collaborating boldly, and designing with imagination.